Somos la Santa Carnal. AGW Beats. Oye, DJ donde que los scratches.
Imagine crossing a border in the dry desert heat, all for bigger, better opportunities, and the so-called American dream. You may hear about immigration on television, but do you really know all the pain and struggle that immigrants go through to get to the United States? Everyone has different opinions on immigration, but I ask for some of your time to hear the stories of these people who deserve the same opportunities and treatments as anyone else in the United States. What exactly is immigration, and what does it mean to be an immigrant? The word immigration is defined as someone coming to live permanently in a foreign country. An immigrant is an individual who is characterized as someone who is living in a foreign country, and you can be considered an immigrant from any place. During the post-World War II period, the surge of immigrants were coming in due to them being refugees. To be more specific, as of now, Mexican immigrants make up about 24% of the foreign-born residents in this country. You might wonder why there are so many immigrants from Mexico, and the one answer is to improve their situation in the sense of economy and or seeking asylum. Let's go back to crossing the border. You may have an idea in your mind, but after a lot of research, what do migrant camps really look like from a real perspective? From the Outcrowd podcast, a migrant camp is a set-up system that is supposed to allow immigrants the access to food, water, shelter, and medical assistance. This may sound like a great idea, but in reality, all of these camps are 100% improvised. Picture this. Long rows of scruffy blue and white gray tents, over 700 of them. To put it into perspective, these tents are designed for camping and only a weekend stay in them for 2 days. There is no water available whenever it is needed. There are 5 portable toilets in the entire camp and 1 kind-hearted nurse volunteering. After the bathrooms fill up, the only option is for the parents to take the children to the woods and then to the river to clean up. When using numbers, there are 5 portable toilets for over 2,500 people. The sanitation is poor, and there is no help from either government in this situation. There is no plan set in place, and here, in these migrant camps, are all the immigrants waiting for the border offices to process their cases for asylum. Contrary to what is happening, a camp should look like this: a tall fence, a guard, or someone keeping track of anyone who comes in and anyone who leaves. Everything is different in Mexico, or even on the border, because government officials do not want their cities to turn into permanent tent spots. But it was not like this. Expectations are changing, because at one point, all you had to do was show up, pass a basic interview, and then wait in the United States for a day in court. After Donald Trump became president, though, all of this changed. Now there is a policy which implies that you have to wait and remain in Mexico, or else you could be sent back. This is also known as the Remain in Mexico policy, formerly known as Migrant Protection Protocols. But after Biden became president, he argued that this policy should be revoked, and the Supreme Court agreed, mentioning that the Biden administration has the right to end a Trump-era immigration policy that forces asylum seekers to wait in Mexico as their cases make their way through the United States immigration courts. According to the American Immigration Council, those who are seeking asylum or refugees are admitted to the United States based upon the inability to return to their home countries. These are cases where they are in fear for their safety. If you didn't know already, there are cutoffs to how many immigrants are allowed into the United States. For example, in the year 2021, the total number of refugee admissions was 62,500, while earlier, with Trump under the Trump administration, the number plummeted to only 15,000. This is an issue that is ever changing, due to those seeking asylum are the ones that need to be out of their home country as fast as possible. You may wonder why some immigrants do not go through the legal system, and here are some uncovered secrets. Let's uncover truths about asylum officers. An asylum officer is someone who interviews individuals to determine if they meet the United States legal definition of a refugee and who are eligible for asylum status. Someone who then seeks asylum is a kind of protection granted by a foreign country to individuals, especially those who are facing any kind of persecution. In an award-winning podcast, they brought in past or former asylum officers to tell what really happened in these offices. For reference, she mentions that one by one, they were being privately called into the border by San Diego State officers. She states, and instead of the credible fear screening they've always done to doing something entirely different, a whole new kind of interview with different rules. When asked why they would want to push the asylum officers to change the interviews, she answered, because I think they knew it was legally dubious and suspect, and they wanted to keep the leak to a minimum. The leak being terminology used when thinking about the numerical value of people being able to cross. When all the officers got a formal PowerPoint of all the changes, they were frightened, because even they knew how dangerous Mexico was and still is, and this policy was made to send immigrants back to Mexico, back to the place where they felt unsafe. A New York Times opinion article talked about a Honduran man. He and his lawyers had filed an asylum case and were waiting for the results. The entire time he waited for an answer, he was placed in a prison cell. From all of the stress from being in a cell, he, who we will call M, due to threats, broke out into hives and went into anaphylactic shock. After receiving treatment at the hospital, M's lawyers requested that he needed a full medical evaluation to recover from his injuries. But immigration officers rejected this request. This request was the only humanitarian course of action and could have been easily granted because of his health problems and issues with being held captive in a cell. To add to that, there was no valid reason as to why this request was denied. Not to mention that he had no criminal record and a friend was even willing to sponsor his release. But why do people not want immigrants in the United States? The most common and overheard reason is immigrants will take Americans' jobs. And to say the least, this is not true, and here's why. The reality is that immigrants are hardworking and take the jobs that Americans don't want. Immigrants are attracted to growing regions, and they increase the supply and demand and expand employment opportunities. While the work is being done, the honest truth is that these people, due to being immigrants, are paid wages below the minimum wage. And bosses and employers take advantage of this and expose them to pesticides and relentless heat, crowded in housing not fit for humans, and are subjected to violence. These types of jobs are the supply chains for fruits and vegetables all around and across the borders. All of these fruits are harvested by immigrants under conditions that violate the core labor statistics. The heart-wrenching part is that these immigrants are mostly from Mexico and are either undocumented or are here in the United States on temporary agricultural visas. These temporary agricultural visas, also known as the H-2A visa, allows United States employers to hire foreign workers to perform agricultural labor. They take agricultural labor with less than minimum wage to survive. The United States has seen 6 cases between Georgia and Florida where these labor contractors from the agricultural visa program were sentenced to human trafficking of the migrant camp workers. How did they manage to keep the camp workers from working with violating the rights and the labor camp statistics? Threats. These contractors took away their passports and their wages by threatening them to deportation. You might think that these are just threats, but the most frightening word they can hear is deport or deportation as an immigrant. The threats range from deportation to rape and kidnapping to make sure that the silence was not broken. Look at the state of Coahuila, which is the last stop for Central American immigrants before attempting to cross the border to the United States. When migrants reach the capital, they are 2,000 kilometers into their journey. How does this 2,000 kilometer journey go? Most of this journey is on foot, walking all day and night. I mean walk on train tracks and hop on trains when they can, and according to one immigrant, where the trains were moving slowly so that they could scramble onto the boxcars without losing hold and falling under the wheels. Added danger to this is when you cross to dangerous parts of Mexico and Central America, where gangs start to show up, including some that will demand money. Johnny, an immigrant in this case, mentions that the real nightmare is when you cross through Mexico due to the government and immigrant officials placing greater hardships on their own people. Soledad Castillo takes us through her journey when she was 14, crossing the border. When riding in trucks with coyotes or smugglers who are willing to take them, they are packed like a can of sardines, and she mentions, "We had to lie down with so many people, one on top of the other." This is how she rode for a while until they got to Texas. And while it was hard to breathe normally with so many people. Castillo talks about walking through the desert for days upon days until they reached Texas. At that point, she was too exhausted and very weak. Her father had to pay the coyote or smuggler extra money to buy her a pill to give her energy. Once she reached California, all mesmerized by the glass buildings, and finally in the United States. But this was only the beginning of the struggle. I watched a documentary, Unreported Fleeing Poverty in Venezuela, which entails similar journeys to those of Mexican immigrants. Smugglers' tracks are the only way to escape poverty in Venezuela. In Venezuela, the issue is poverty, hunger, and medical shortages, and the government not caring about the families who are in a struggle. In this documentary, a young woman is part of the migrants trying to cross to Colombia with a baby. Border Patrol stops the crowd from leaving. Her child was born with a kidney disease and needs dialysis, and without treatment, she will die. After pleading with Border Patrol, they let her cross. When the reporter asks what life is like in Venezuela, a young 17-year-old boy answers, "If I stayed here, I'd be waiting to die from starvation." They have gone days without food and even say that 2 months' worth of wages would only cover one meal. The reporter asks if they have any money in their pockets. She pulls out 200 pesos, which is the equivalent to around 6 United States cents. The only difference is that they are traveling from Venezuela to Colombia. After finding a 16-year-old girl and asking her about her journey, we quickly learned that she tried to find a job everywhere in Colombia, but no employers had enough money to hire additional workers. She thought that everything would be different there in Colombia, but lost hope. She turned to prostitution at the age of 16 to survive, to make ends meet and enough money to feed herself. If you were to ask me what my solution to this big idea is, I really wouldn't know how to answer. I wouldn't know how to answer, not because I don't know anything about the topic, but because our system in the United States is so broken and so wrong that I wouldn't know where to begin. From the corruption of both the United States and Mexico, there's no clear-cut answer. I do believe that there should be better immigration policies that not only allow more immigrants into the United States, but also give them the protection they deserve so that their life is not in danger, when the only reason they are leaving is due to safety concerns and not being able to support themselves or their families in their home countries. You may all have different opinions on the topic of immigration, and you each have your different opinions on whether or not you support it. I wanted to take a different perspective on delivering what immigration is. I wanted to show you what immigrants go through because they are humans too. Humans who want opportunities just like everyone else in this world. Because no, we are not criminals. No, we don't want to take your jobs. No, we don't burden the national economy. Yes, I'm saying we, because while I may not have crossed the border, my dad did. My dad was 14 when he traveled through the desert like so many people do today. He too felt hunger and the desperation of not being able to do anything. He too was crammed in the back of a car with others, but he did it with big hopes and dreams for a better future for his generation, to create a better future for us. Thank you.